we have the first call as soon as we get on air. Ted Cruz has won the state of Kansas. Okay, now let's understand. Okay, wait, before I get to more. Ted Cruz winning in Maine. What is this? And as you see there, he has, at this point, more than doubled Trump's vote in Kansas.
And Cruz is the one to turn Kansas around. They've had a lot of problems, but I think he can.
I think so.
I think he can fix it.
Yeah, he can fix it. Yeah.
What they've needed is conservative leadership.
They need tax cuts.
They need tax cuts.
Yeah.
There's a tax somewhere out in the woods. They're going to track it down and they're going to kill it.
Yeah, and Ted Cruz is their guy to do that. Okay, so now this is dramatic. So let's. Now, we've got a lot of Democratic races that are coming up, but since they don't have results yet, and I have all the different poll closings for you in a little bit, although they're annoyingly in Central Time, and understand that we don't have Democratic results in Kansas yet because the Democrats caucus is at a slightly different time than the Republicans. We're not ignoring the results. There aren't any results yet. It's the same day, same state, but different closings,
yes.
Okay? So now, having said that, let's discuss what's happening on the Republican side here. Now, with Ted Cruz with a huge victory in Kansas, 51-24 so far, and now leading in Maine, this is significant. Now, Kansas is a caucus which helps the more organized Ted Cruz. A lot of these states are closed caucuses, which means that independents who are more likely to support Donald Trump cannot come in and vote for Donald Trump, which also helps Cruz. Nonetheless, the crushing style of victory so far, or the manner in which Cruz has crushed Trump in Kansas and is currently leading in Maine, is a big surprise given how the race was going. So there was the expectation that with the polling indicating that Trump would win Maine and not necessarily win in Kansas, but at least be close. The fact that these results are not anywhere near that and far more leaning towards Cruz than against Trump indicates that perhaps we have a turn. Okay, so we might have our first turn in the Republican race, very, very late on in the race here, obviously. Now, you remember in 2012, they went up and down, all the different candidates. There was a ton of turns. I said in the beginning, I don't think there'll be very many turns after it became apparent that Trump was the leader. Before that, I was skeptical along with everyone else, right? As soon as he was the leader, I said he'll hold this for a long, long time, but he won't necessarily hold it all the way. And recently, a couple of days ago, especially after that last dick debate, I said, I think there might be a turn. Yeah. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, it looks like there's a turn. It looks like there's a turn.
I think we're going to have 6 more pieces of information. We can compare, even in the other states of which many he won't win. We can see if he beat the polling by a lot. I think that there's probably some effect from the debate, maybe, but it's difficult to say when there's the other factors of, for instance, it being a caucus, which traditionally hasn't been very good for Donald Trump, it being closed, and this being an example of a state. And I've referenced this, I believe, at the debate, that people, I think Kansas might have been the example, where people were saying in advance of it that he has no presence. There are no employees. There are no ads. He thinks he's going to coast in all these states. And then you had the Trump, the organizer, saying on Facebook, this guy has no idea how the delegate math works or how delegates work. He thinks it's just a national contest. You're up in the polls nationally, and that's all you have to do. But that said, look, it's obviously good for Ted Cruz to get this. In every state Ted Cruz is able to win, even if it's not a winner-take-all one, it makes it a little bit harder for Trump to get those 50% plus 1 delegates to avoid a contested convention. That said, is this the beginning of Cruz himself getting 50%? That I think is a more difficult case to make.
All right, well, so listen, here are the reasons why I thought there might be a turn. One, I thought the comments about his penis were a bridge too far. A
shaft too far.
Yes, apparently so. And like at some point, the good folks in the Midwest, like Kansas perhaps, would go, that's not Kansas values, right? And here we are. By the way, Nate Silver's 538 was the first to point this out, at least that I saw. There is now a Midwestern wall against Trump.
Really?
Yeah. Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Minnesota goes to Rubio. So there's a wall going right down the middle of the country against Donald Trump.
That is Cruz's spot, man.
Right.
And Alaska.
And so
Canada too. He's going to clean up.
yeah, well, he's from
Also,
Canada. So, it
so
makes sense.
far, so Nate Silver had a breakdown of the sorts of states that Cruz wins and the sorts of states that Donald Trump wins. And Cruz, so far, it's probably just coincidence, but wins big, geographically spread out, which tend to be more rural states, whereas Trump tends to do better in tight, tiny, like almost like his hands states. And so they compared the total geographic distance that the states they'd won covered, and he had like 4 times as much geography under Cruz.
Right. So Penisgate was reason number 1. Reason number 2 is the entire Republican Party is turned on him. How much of an assault can he withstand? Not just Romney, Paul Ryan, Glenn Beck, Mark Levin. You know, the list goes on and on. I know that the latter 2 have been with Cruz all along, but so many people, every editorial is against him. Now that everybody's saying in the Republican establishment, he's not really a conservative. They keep hitting him with his hypocrisy. Now, on top of that, those are the first 2 reasons. The third reason is his enormous arrogance, right? Now, arrogance almost always costs you at some point, right? And this guy doesn't think that he needs to do any ads, right?
Yeah.
Because he's not raising money from super PACs, so all right, God bless, right? He actually doesn't want to spend that much of his own money because he's cheap. So he's actually just not running ads, and he doesn't have much of a ground game. Well, then his ignorance is point number 4. I mean, after Iowa, the next morning, he said on television, I guess there's this thing called a ground game. I just found out about it. Like, you're running for president, and for all those months, and you never bothered to investigate what a ground game means? A ground game means your ability to have supporters on the ground, volunteers on the ground, turning out the vote, and doing all the necessary things to get people excited at the ground at those states. How could anyone running for president not know that? That's only if you're enormously arrogant and ignorant, which is a combination that usually goes together.
Yeah.
So when you have that toxic stew, at some point it catches up with you. Now, there was a good question here, and there still is, whether that point is distant enough that he'll be able to withstand this assault because he's already won so much.
He's got that big lead already.
Right, he has a big lead. But, you know, it's not that big. Ted Cruz won Texas. That's the largest state that's gone so far. New York hasn't gone. California hasn't gone. Florida, Ohio, Illinois, none of these have gone, and they're still coming up. So he better watch himself. I think he's in real trouble here. And unfortunately, as I thought the real challenger to him would be Cruz, it turns out it's Cruz, right? And Rubio's a boy. He's a lightweight. He isn't winning anywhere. And the establishment keeps rooting for it to be Rubio, but here's what they're missing. The Republican voters want a dick. Maybe not a dick that talks about his dick, but they want a dick, right?
Yeah.
Rubio seems friendly, even though he's not. His policies are vicious. I understand that. But he seems kind. That's why the establishment likes him. Continuity on the outside. Change on the outside looks, Latino, young, continuity on the inside. But the voters don't want that. The Republican voters are like, give me somebody vicious. And then when Trump is having troubles, they look over to Cruz and they're like, that guy is definitely sufficiently vicious.
You know what just happened? They spread the dick around. You're spreading the dick vote.
That's right. That's right.
Predicted it.
So it looks like we might have a turn.